My name is Will Schreier, and welcome back to another episode of the Lovable Survivor Podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk about a little something different, it might be a little controversial. I don't think if you're a regular listener to me or this podcast, if you know anything about my history, this may not be that surprising of a topic, but I think it is one that is worth having a conversation about. It is not the same for everybody. I think there are lots of opinions in this space. So let's just jump right into it. So this episode is really centered around medical marijuana and some of the perks, some of the pluses, some of the minuses. Definitely my take, which may be different than you might be thinking right now. For those that don't know my kind of colorful historical past, I, grew up as a kid in Jersey. Like most teenagers, did a little bit of experimenting. I think for me, early on in my high school career, I got into drinking, a little bit of weed. I don't think that's very uncommon, especially in the 90s before the real internet boom and before everybody had a screen 24/7. We used to have cell phones and beepers. It was just a different time. And I think it's probably still the same to some degree. But, I think there are some, I don't know. We'll just go through my take and my experience with medical marijuana. It was not something I initially really sought out to get involved with, although I did realize when we moved here in 2019, even before my stroke, that it was something in the state of Florida that was legalized. I think that has been more and more throughout the country. I don't pay that much attention state to state, so I apologize if I don't know your particular case, but I think it is definitely a conversation worth having on this show. If it's an option for you in your state or location, I think it's worth considering. But yeah, I think for me, I was a little resistant because I do have a colorful past with drugs and alcohol. Not really so much drugs after college. I was a big experimenter. I think that still is true in terms of everything I do. I like to try new things. I don't mess around with drugs anymore so much. Definitely not the illicit kind. Way past that. Alcohol is no longer a thing in my life, for me particularly, but I don't mind being around people that drink. I know all my friends, my wife still drinks, my daughter is in college, my boys are too young, but yeah, that's not something I shy away from. And I really learned my lesson, and I just don't have an interest in it anymore. Really nothing else other than I think it played a significant role in my stroke and my kind of medical journey of the last couple of years. But, I'm fine taking it off the table for me. I don't really, like I said, have an interest in going back to it, but I am not against it. For anybody that can use it and enjoy it safely and without, just not to the level that I was kind of taking it. So if you got it under control, great. If you need help, seek help. I could tell you'd probably rather spend a little bit of time, doing some rehab and things like that. If you're at that level, I would consider that definitely before you have a stroke. Not that one leads to the other, but I think in my case, it definitely played a major role. It may not have been the direct cause, but it definitely was a thing. Anyways, this show is not about alcohol. This show is about medical marijuana and some of the major benefits, and I'll touch on kind of the high level. And again, we're going to go through kind of my experience. I was hesitant to talk about it. I didn't really talk about it for a long time because I had such a checkered past with alcohol and drugs in my college years that, when somebody mentioned it to me, I very quietly sort of looked into it. And, I liked that things were legal. I like things were somewhat regulated, and I think that, again, varies state to state. So I think when you think in terms of the benefits, there are no shortage. I think high level, it's great for pain management and some aspects of the physical recovery. I think it's been proven, I think it depends on what you read, what you try, how your body reacts to things. It can have some mental, well-being benefits, some emotional benefits, some neurological benefits. I think there probably needs to be some continued research. And again, I think like a lot of things when it comes to stroke, it's really, individually based. I think there are, again, like stroke, I think you can group things together. I think there are things like mood and pain relief. I think that it probably goes without saying that in general, I think it can help people with, I don't know if better sleep is necessarily the proper terminology, but I think it can definitely help you get to sleep if you have trouble sleeping. Yeah, I mean, there's just a ton of things like, decrease sleep disturbances. It can help you stay asleep longer. There are definitely many benefits, but I think it just depends on the individual. I think for me, I will tell you that I waited almost 2 years. I didn't try it until the end of 2021. So about 22, I want to say it was about 22 months after my initial stroke. And at that point, I was grasping at straws a little bit because I felt like I was making progress, but due to the MS and the stroke, I wasn't sure, and still I'm not sure many days what's what. I will say that I continue to search for that. I know it doesn't exist, but I sort of keep trying things to get a little bit better, get a little bit further. It's not so much the magic pill, but I was really optimistic. I was like, okay, well, I've tried a lot of things. Medical marijuana is now legal in the state of Florida. I qualified having that MS and a stroke at a young age. I see the medical benefits. I didn't really see it. I'll be honest, I don't think there's been a downside. I think in my experience, it wasn't necessarily the magic pill that I was hoping for. And some of the reasons I really pursued this initially, despite my hesitation, was because things like spasticity, I have some still lingering issues with things are not really like I could stretch till I could spend all day stretching and breathing, but like there are some things that just my hand on any given day can be totally fine. And then the next day it's just very stiff. I think that's probably BMS, but again, I can't really determine always what's what. And, it doesn't even really matter. It's just that I know that there is stiffness. Sleep I've never really had an issue with. I've got the pretty under control. The only thing I have trouble with sleeping sometimes is I get a little too focused in the evenings sometimes with work, or just like not even work, just I would call it casual working. It's like not work that I have to do, but it's things that I could do that I like to do while I'm hanging out with family or watching TV. I guess it's kind of that. It's almost like study hall in the evenings. Sometimes it's like that work that you don't need to do, but it's kind of fun and it's on the side and it's like something you're looking into. Sometimes I like doing research. Sometimes I like, writing for Twitter or working on a website, which I didn't even promo this week, but I am working on the Lovable Survivor, the actual main website, not just the podcast website. So that should be coming soon. Anyways, back on track. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many different things that medical marijuana covers. And I think in Florida, and I don't know if this is the same in every state, they seem to do a pretty good job with things. But I think when it comes to there's so many different, there's edibles, there is vape, there is the traditional rolling paper and some bud. There are patches, which I've had a really hard time getting my hands on, which is something I still want to try. I've taken a little break from it because initially I got my card and I wanted to try different things. And I found a couple of things that I liked, but I found a bunch that I didn't like. For me, marijuana, I'm not one of those people that really got into it. I mean, I definitely did a fair amount of drugs in my day. That's nothing I shy away from. I'll be honest, weed and marijuana, the same thing. I like the kind that let you laugh and relax and kind of, you put on a comedy and you have a good time. And I think that's enjoyable for me. I don't like the kind that just makes you blah. Not really my jam. To be quite honest, I've always been a guy that's more of an upper, which is stupid because I don't really need any more energy. I've got a ton of energy, even for a stroke survivor with MS. Yeah, I've tried different kinds, different strains. There are some consistencies. There are some inconsistencies. But having MS and having had a stroke, some of the potential benefits that I've been interested in are the anti-inflammatory, the pain relief. I don't have a ton of pain, like I said, but sometimes it comes and goes. I don't really like using any of this stuff during the day. This is more of an evening thing for me, which is weird because I don't need to go to sleep, but I like it to be obviously, at home, quiet, just needed necessarily. It's kind of a before bed thing to help again with that spasticity, that muscle tension, that MS. Sometimes there's flare ups, and my body with all the running and the things, it helps brain cell. Allegedly, I don't know that this is 100% true, but promotion of brain cell recovery, like I said, pain relief. Spasticity is definitely a thing I have some issues with ankle and foot, and particularly the right side. But yeah, I think there are tons of benefits. I just think that, like a lot of things, I was hoping it would be sort of this magic pill, with air quotes. I'm not saying it isn't, but I haven't seen a ton of benefits. Now, to be fair, there are tons of things to try. It kind of is expensive. One of the things I really hate is that there is a state card, then you have a doctor, and then the doctor has a prescription and that runs out every couple of months. So you have to go to this doctor to get the prescription for another couple months. And yeah, it would just be nice if to get it all consolidated to make it a little bit easier and a little bit less of a pain in the ass. But I think like most things, there are the good sides and bad side. I like that it is somewhat regulated. Obviously, I know it's growing in the earth. It's hard to be 100% consistent. I'd love to see it be a little bit more consistent in what I've tried. I think with time, it'll get better because I believe this is still, I'm not even, what, maybe 4 or 5 years. So, I think there are improvements that can be made. And again, I think it's worth trying for any number of reasons, especially if you had a stroke or a brain injury or really anything. But, again, pain relief, moods. If you have a lot of mood issues, I think my mood things are under control. Like I said, anti-inflammatory. I do not have epilepsy, but I've definitely had a seizure back in 2020. I think that one was kind of, I wouldn't say a fluke, but I think it was that I got diagnosed with MS and I was not on all the medication that I should have been until I had the seizure, which if you've ever had one is scary as fuck. To be quite honest, I did not know what was happening at the time. I will never make that mistake again to be off that medication. So it's clear that I need to be on that for a long time. And I'm fine with that because I don't need to go through that event again. So yeah, I think it's worth trying if you've tried a lot of things, if you're still having some issues in your journey and you've tried a lot of physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy. I think it just comes down to body chemistry and finding the right kind of, maybe the right strain, I guess, and what works with your body, and not just the right strain, but also the right application. Because like I said, there's a number of applications. There's edibles, there are vapes, there are traditional, like so many things. There's patches. I mean, you go in there, it's like any one of these facilities, depending on where you go, some are bigger than others. But yeah, I mean, it's I would say the downside to the legalization is that there is so many options, which is nice in the beginning, but it can get expensive. So if you don't really find what's working for you initially, it's a little frustrating. But I wouldn't, I'm taking a break right now. So I think I found some other alternative things. Breathing has been a huge thing for me. So again, it's not off the table. It's just kind of like a break for me. I just haven't gotten the benefits, and maybe it takes more research on my end. Like I said, there's a lot of information. There's a lot of different things you can try. There's a lot of different strength. I mean, this is so, it's such diverse world once you get into it. And I'm not downplaying any of the significant benefits of medical marijuana. I just think that it's just like, again, there's so many different types. There's so many different benefits, and it's a lot of trial and error. And you read stuff online and somebody says one thing, they had the greatest experience with this one. They loved it. It made them feel so great. And then you go and try that and then you come home and you try it and you're like, ugh, this is like the worst experience I've ever had. And it's just such unfortunately, it's a little bit hit or miss. And this is coming from a guy that, went to college at Miami. I grew up in Jersey. Weed was not my big jam in my teens and 20s, but I will tell you, I have certainly tried enough of it to know the vast quantities and differences. I have tried it overseas. I mean, I spent time in Amsterdam numerous times. I think I've been to Amsterdam 4 or 5 times now for multiple days and multiple weeks. I lived in Italy for a year. It's not hard. It was never hard to get overseas. In Europe, on the mainland, especially. So, I am not a rookie, although I feel like when I go into these places, yeah, it's just a really interesting thing, but I do think it has tons of benefits. And I think if, like I said, you live somewhere where this is an option, it is certainly worth exploring. I would say, if do your research, talk to your doctors, see what they recommend. I think I think it's an interesting industry because I don't know, you know, yeah, because I think it is regulated. Like are some people, still that world, right? You don't know if somebody's recommending something because it's going to make them more money. Somehow they get something on the back end. Is it really going to help the thing you need? I found that in most of these places, the information that the people are providing is pretty good, but you still have to, I think they're giving you, just like a lot of online websites, a lot of different, medical marijuana directories online. I think you're getting it is kind of crowdsourced, right? Like, I think if a bunch of people are saying this is great, it's great for pain, then it probably is great for pain for the majority. But that just doesn't mean it's going to work out for the pain that you have necessarily, or your body may react differently. So I think that is something to be mindful of, but it is, I think it is promising. I think we're still in the very, it sounds crazy, but I think we're still in the very early days of this world. And I think that people who are able to do research and testing, it's just such I think when you're in the testing and that kind of world of really taking the scientific approach here, you are at the mercy of, same as any other industry where something in the ground, whether that be food or food is where I was thinking here, like, there are common traits, but then there's like organic and non-organic, and, this thing uses this pesticide and that pesticide, and they all can get very complicated, but the overall benefits of certain things are true. So I think just keep that in mind when you're starting to explore this, if it's something you're interested in. Like I said, I think my biggest surprise about the medical marijuana benefits is that I think I just had really high hopes for something that I didn't initially really consider. And it may be that I have not tried the right thing. I mean, there probably is. And it may be that the benefits that I wanted just weren't enough. There's that. Maybe there hasn't been enough time. I don't know. I mean, I will say, really not too many downsides. When I had everything that I've tried in the last couple of years, when it comes to medical marijuana, has been a good experience. There are definitely certain types of strains that I know I don't want, need, or really jive with. I think that I said that earlier, the ones that really just kind of my pain is, I would say, in general, any pain I've had as a residual side effect from the stroke or MS has been relatively mild, not heavy pain. So I don't really need anything to knock me out or things like that. Like, any pain that I've had over the last couple of years has really been kind of equivalent to, I hate to say this, but kind of like my mom used to say, take two Advil and suck it up. Take a little Tylenol, and that's all I really need. I think, and again, I got into the medical marijuana kind of path because somebody who I know who also had a stroke recommended it. I was like, oh, I really should look into that. And I think this is still true. I was looking for it to, and still am to some degree, looking for it to replace some of the medications, or if I have some kind of pain flare up, or, I do see that benefit. Yeah. And I think to the other part where emotional, mental, sure. But I don't know. It's interesting. I have no interest in it replacing or taking over any part of my life at this point. Yeah, I mean, I guess some of the benefits I'm still looking for are getting off some of the medications. And one of the things I'm thinking of is because I still have some spasticity, which for those that don't know is like my hand gets a little crampy, my leg gets a little crampy. There's just some kind of stiffness that feels like I could stretch for a month. And sometimes I feel like I am stretching for a month and things are still not good. And I wouldn't say not good. I'd just say not as good as I'd like them to be. So I do take what's called baclofen, which is a muscle relaxer to help me. Basically it unbucks my hand. And I think if all things considered, I like that. Marijuana does grow in the ground the same way as zucchini, cucumber, whatever, a lot of vegetables. And not that I'm by no stretch am I what you would consider a hippie at all. In fact, I'm the exact opposite of a hippie, but I think when you're on a number of medications and you're only 40, I'm not against taking the baclofen. I do take it daily. I just wouldn't mind not taking it if that makes sense. And I hope that makes sense. I mean, if that makes sense to anybody, I just love to see if I could get some of the benefits of the medical marijuana. And it doesn't have to be, vape. I actually, and I will say this with some hesitation, but what I like, and I don't have any desire to smoke or vape, anything with nicotine anymore. Zero, zilch, like none. Just like I have no desire to drink. I think my initial I tried some edibles and I just find even at 6'8", 325 pounds, that often when I have tried it, it's been a little much for me. So I do like a little quick vape because I feel like that is the fastest, easiest way to get a very little smidge. And maybe that's the problem too. Maybe I don't book enough time. Like, I have kids, I have responsibilities. When I try this, I let my wife know, hey, trying this tonight. I'm gonna do this for a little bit, see if it helps a little. And sometimes it does, but maybe I don't know how much. I only do what I feel like is comfortable, which I think is wise, right? So I don't know. Maybe I'm a wimp. I mean, I don't think I have anything left to prove. I am a stroke survivor living with MS, 6'8", 325 pounds. I run 10 plus miles a day at this point. The fact that I'm even running at all is insane. Yeah, I've done just about every dumb thing you could do on the planet. I've done just about every drug you could do on the planet. So if I'm not smoking enough weed to get the benefits, yeah, okay, that's a valid statement, but I don't really care. Because I don't think it's about that. It's really just about finding the things that work for you. And unfortunately, like I said, many times throughout this episode, I had high hopes. I still believe that there are things that could work. And again, there have not been downsides to this for me. At the very least, I get a little bit better sleep. I get to sleep quicker. When I do it, I tend to want to go to bed earlier. So that in and of itself is a win in my book. Sometimes I just have a hard time wanting to go to bed, but once I lay down, it's a non-issue for me. So I think it's a really interesting conversation. I think it's worth exploring if it is something that you've been considering, if it's something that is legal in your state. I wouldn't dismiss it. And one of the things that I think I think it's important to know obviously all the risks, all the possible potential upsides, knowing some downsides, and just sort of setting the bar like a lot of things where, I think this is still, when I started this, it was a year and a half in, and I think I had the bar a little high for what I got. But in the last year, I found running, I found breathing, both are amazing for me. In fact, I think next episode we will talk finally about some breathing and some of the main benefits, because this whole podcast is about sharing sort of the successes and the failure, or the downfalls. And like I would say, medical marijuana, like I said, is worth trying. It is, for me, it was not a home run. It wasn't not a home run, but it was just sort of a middle of the road. Didn't really move the needle. Hasn't yet moved the needle for me in the way that I had hoped. But I would say I'd put it back on the shelf, and I'm going to, keep checking it out every so often. I think the initial wave of the excitement of it. And yeah, so I think the initial wave of an excitement of it has gone by the wayside, but it will be something I will be keeping my eye on and always kind of reassessing, like a lot of things. And I think as more things roll out, and as I talk to more doctors or my doctors and they find out new information, again, this is really a team effort, because I'm really interested on, I don't know how much the brain will be able to rebuild, but I think there are a lot of different conversations happening in similar spaces about different parts of the brain taking over. And I do with that spasticity in general, and specifically that, like I said, it's not a high level of pain that I'm experiencing on a daily basis, but there's just annoying things that, honestly, I don't care if it's medical marijuana. I don't care if it's a pill. It's like, it's just these things that I would like to get better under control if possible. I mean, I'm also aware that there are things that are way outside of my control, like spasticity in general. So yeah, I think it's always keeping an open ear, keeping open eyes, and hoping for the best. And honestly, I hope you try it. I hope it works out for you. I hope this has been helpful. I think it's an ongoing conversation, especially as each state or even the country, kind of mature in the cannabis space. Because I think there's a lot of upside. Of course, given the history of medical marijuana or marijuana in general in this country, it definitely has a connotation, but I think there are great upsides here, and I think it's really worth keeping an eye on for anybody who's had a significant major medical life event. I think there are, like I said, there's tons of upside, and I'm just kind of excited about what the future holds and what people, where this space grows over the next 2, 3, 5 years, 10 years, And even if it doesn't work out great for me, like I said, I hope it works out great for people behind me, people maybe similar spaces that just have a different reaction. So yeah, I think we'll leave this episode at that. I do want to remind you, if you've enjoyed this episode or any of the other episodes, if you would not mind leaving a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. I am working on some new things, like I've said last couple of episodes. I'm working on some things that will hopefully, I'll be able to share with you in the coming weeks. I believe the next episode, we are going to jump into breathing, which is something I'm really excited to talk about because I get a lot of questions about it, even from non-survivors. So I think next episode is going to have a lot of great information on breathing. If you haven't heard me talk about it before or seen me on Twitter talking about it, it's kind of my jam. It is the game changer for me in the last year, which was year 2/3 of my stroke recovery, which is typically where things start to really slow down. And I had quite a good last year in terms of overall development in my stroke recovery. So again, I'm excited to talk about that. And if you aren't necessarily into leaving a podcast review or rating on your favorite podcast app, that's totally cool. Definitely go to podcast.lovablesurvivor.com, sign up for the newsletter. And if you're interested in joining the community that we're working on building for stroke survivors and survivors of any brain injury, you can go to vip.survivorscience.com. That is sort of the complimentary community for Lovable Survivor. Both are owned by me, and I'm working on kind of consolidating everything. So yeah, hope you like this episode and look forward to talking next week. Bye for now.